Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of This Imaginary Life. This is a post-game hangout show where a bunch of awesome game masters of tabletop RPGs get together. We've got decades of experience here, and we're going to talk about things that are going on at our tables, things we're excited about, and we even have questions that we will field from the internets. We also have turned on Q&A, so if you're watching this live and you've got a problem at your table, you'd like a few people to give you advice on that, submit away. I'm going to bring on our panelists that we have here tonight, starting off with the ever-talented and brilliant Jen Martin, who you may see on an occasional Jankcast episode. How are you tonight, Jen?
I'm very good, thank you.
Good, good. Next we have John Stavropoulos, who is from New York. He's involved in all
less
games.
Less talented than Jen.
He's not as talented, no, but hairier.
Well, I mean, who is, right?
It's true. It's unfair.
More in here
comparison.
sweet, and he puts the sweet in here sweet is John Stavropoulos. And then showing a little skin, trying to help our overall reach is the son of Cryos, known as Judd Carlman. How are you, Judd?
Hey, talk to your players. What's up?
Yes, take a drink. I'll do that now.
Take the shirt off, actually.
Oh my!
John, stop. Too early.
Last but not least, from Play on Target and also the interwebs with his own Patreon, where he reviews and talks about the history of RPGs, is our very studious and intelligent Lowell Francis.
Well, that's very nice of you to say.
It's only because it's true. I can't believe that you have, like, how many parts were your superhero RPGs? Like 13 parts?
13 parts.
13 parts.
So, it was a long.
You didn't even name
It was
13 RPG?
much- Yeah, it was much longer than it wanted it to be. So.
Well, you know, Kickstarter's only going to make your job that much harder, I think.
Yeah.
All right, well, let us kick it off with our wonderful stuff we're into. It's where each of us get 2 minutes, and I'm timing it, to talk about anything gaming related that you are super excited about. I've taken notes so that I could talk for up to 2 minutes, but I can go first unless someone else has an itching or burning desire to kick this sucker off.
Do it.
Go for it, Rich.
All right, so here is the start button, and we go. First of all, 2 sessions in on a playtest of a game is Powered by the Apocalypse. It's a superhero game. It's kind of the style of the Young Justice animated show as well as X-Men. So it's kind of a cool, angsty teen book called Masks. Brendan Conway is currently developing it. I've had a really great time playing this so far. We haven't even stepped into character. It's all been world gen and character generation and team creation. Super awesome stuff. Loving that. Looking forward to more and more playtests of that. Urban Shadows just started a play-by-post with that. It's just recently completed Kickstarter, and every iteration of the archetypes, which are the playbooks for this, and the moves, everything changes. So it's like learning a new game every week, but it keeps getting tighter and tighter, and I'm pretty excited about it. Oh, but the changes, like my wolf got nerfed, but I'll be okay. I'll be okay. I'm super loving the fact that I get to play, revitalize an old play-by-post character named Rue Wakeman, who started off on Snail's Pace in a game that kind of faltered out of the gate, and I get to bring her back. And it's neat writing in dialect because I'm from the South, from East Tennessee, and I have a really bad accent when I'm tired or not controlling myself. And writing in that dialect, kind of immersing in it, has been an interesting exercise. It's been kind of cathartic and fun. Last thing is I got to participate in AlexCon, which is where one guy named Alex Prinz, who his wife went away for 2 weeks, he ran like 30 games in 2 weeks. It was insane, and I was lucky to partake in some of that. The guy is like a madman. I don't know how he ran or played so many games. Am I going to get time? Okay, I'm done. That's my whole stuff. I feel sad. I was supposed to get 2 whole minutes. What's up with that?
Doesn't it beep or something?
It would eventually, but I stopped early.
Oh, I see how it is.
Minutes. We don't
You can't do that, dude. You just have to suffer in silence. Come on, are we dedicated to this premise or are we not?
Dead air is the anathema of good stuffs.
Good stuffs.
So you gotta keep talking, baby.
All right, who's up next?
I'll go next.
All right, you are on the clock.
Okay. So had a really good session. We're just about the end of about 2.5 years of a Roll20 Mutants and Masterminds campaign. Just getting towards the end of it, doing my whole riff on Secret Wars and Age of Apocalypse and Days of Future Past, and got that set up this week, and we're finally getting to the end of that, and I've been happy with that. The campaigns I'm doing locally, we just moved on to a couple of new things. One of them to kind of a cyber ninja revenge-seeking riff game that's been fun, and actually we're just now switching some players in and out in our Legend of the Five Rings game. Let's see what else. Got some new games this week. Somebody had done a really interesting Moomin Troll skin for Golden Sky Stories that I've been looking through, and I really want to run that now. I liked Golden Sky Stories, but the ability to do kind of Moomin Troll tales is very cool. I got AD-43, which is a very neat sort of horror Roman legionary game, different from the actual legionary game. This one has a little bit of the supernatural to it, very much essentially Roman soldiers in the wilds of Britain trying to figure it out. And I'm trying to picture it in terms of Glorantha and like lunar troopers in Sartar kind of thing, and that's how I've been trying to picture how I might actually use that. And let me think if there's anything else I want to say. I think that's about it. Prepping for Games on Demand for Gen Con, trying to get all that stuff together and get planned what I want to do there. So that's kind of tough. Trying to narrow those things down, since it'll be the first time I've actually done that. Oop.
Oh man, you got 2 minutes out of it. Good job.
No dead air.
That's excellent. Wow, that's cool. So what's a Moomin Troll? What's that?
Oh, it's I think is it Finland? It's a series of children's books by Tove Jansson. They're sort of classic and very big in Europe. And when I was a little kid, I remember reading them, and they're sort of fairy tale type characters, but very, very popular overseas. You should ask Yana about it. She knows them very well.
What's Glorantha?
Glorantha from yeah. Are you asking me seriously? What?
No, he's not.
Okay, thank you.
I'm 75% serious, but we can
Okay.
move on.
That's like an 800-page tome of some game, right? It weighs like 75 pounds and it costs $600 or something.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was tempted, but I'm not. I've got enough Glorantha stuff from the old days. I don't want to spend any more money.
Well, you could always wait for the bundle of holding when they'll charge you like $23.50 for it.
Yeah.
So. All right, who's next?
I'll go.
Okay, go for it, Judd. You are on the clock.
Cool. I got a book by Sean Andrew Murray, and it's called Gateway, the Book of Wizards, and it is very well illustrated, as I will show by pushing it up to the camera. It is a book about a city called Gateway, and the wizards have been made illegal, and it's just it's almost like a little weird monster manual of wizards and people who have made themselves odd and beautiful and powerful and terrible through magic. And I kind of love it. I've got this thing of collecting monster manuals, and this is definitely kind of up that alley. It definitely has like a setting behind it. There's a story that kind of weaves through, but I like it. It's just these little kind of story vignettes. It's adorable, and I think there was a Kickstarter for it, so it was independent. I'm pretty sure it was independently produced, and the copy I got is signed. I didn't get in on the Kickstarter. I actually bought it late, but it's good stuff. If you just want, some cool wizards to, inspire you, maybe make a little setting, it's really neat. Kind of steampunky. I don't really like steampunk, but I like this. On the cover are the Defiant Five, who were this group of wizards who went up against the Inquisition, in the summer of 1866, when the Standards of Acceptable and Limited Magic Usage for Non-Essentials Act was passed, and the terrible things that happened to them because of their political, activity, and good stuff. The other thing that I've got on my computer right now, I know D&D's new edition just came out, but I just discovered this thing called E6. And E6 is...
Oh, forever a mystery.
Wow, Rich is ruthless.
Oh, 2 minutes. Oh, so. I'm sure you can hit up Rye or a link that you can provide us later to learn all about E6.
I'll put a link to E6.
Awesome. All right, Jen or John, who's up next?
Not it.
Oh, you want to be like the last. You're like the cleanup hitter here.
I do, absolutely.
All right, so it's John, and John, you can't just think for 2 minutes. That's dead air. All right, here we go. You're on the clock.
No dead air. Excellent. So what do I have going on or been doing? I recently played a hack of Monster Hearts run by the lovely Joe Beeson called Elder Hearts, where you play 70-year-olds in a community retirement home instead of high school. And that was very amazing and actually didn't really require changing much of anything. So I highly recommend that. Like Lowell, a lot of preparation for Gen Con's Game on Demand. If you guys don't know what Games on Demand is, definitely look it up on Google Plus or wherever you want. Google is good too. And that's going to be awesome. My friend Barbara is putting together a LARP based on the board game Clue. So we're going to play that very soon, which is pretty exciting. Tomorrow, the day after, I'm going to be going to the Nighthawk Cinema to watch Transformers, the animated movie from 1986, on the big screen in the theater. And it's this awesome theater where they actually serve food at your seat. So you have these tables, and they give you these custom menus, and the menus are customized to the movie you're watching. So I have no idea what custom food I'm going to get for the Transformers animated movie, but we'll see. It'll be a surprise. So what else? Solid Samurai's come out. Where's it? Here we go. Is that like the right way? You guys read that?
We see it.
I can see that.
Okay, excellent. What is it? It's 100 cutting-edge, ultra-hearty, easy-to-make salads you don't have to be vegan to love. Am I the only one who's vegetarian here?
Yeah.
I love meat and killing animals.
Oh, wow. That's good to know.
Not personally, I pay other people to do it.
So you're a wimp, is what you're saying.
Excellent. And I very recently posted a public free document about how to write rules game instructions for people who are looking to write board games, role-playing games, whatever you'd like. And we're done.
That was excellent. All right. Sorry for the vegetarian hatred. I appreciate people who have the thing to just eat vegetables. Go you. I just really like eating animal stuff. It's not political. It just tastes really delicious. Okay, Jen.
Yes.
You're up.
All right. Okay.
Bring it home.
Okay.
Please don't ask me any political stuff.
Okay, I won't. I promise. Okay. I'm nicer than John.
You're up.
So last weekend I went down to Southwest Virginia and hung out with the iPodcast Magic Missile people, and I got to play a game of Dread by Firelight, which was awesome. Although originally we were supposed to actually stack logs onto the fire as part of the mechanic.
Oh, wow.
We ended up needing the logs to get the fire going in the first place. So it was just a table set next to, and then we did our thing, and it was super awesome. We were all girls in a like Japanese school with the vengeful ghost coming after us, and of course she died. She was burnt to death. So we had the fire right there, and it was super awesome. We played till 2 o'clock in the morning, which is my habit apparently of when I play Dread too. And I keep thinking I'm just gonna knock the tower over and go to sleep. I'm just gonna knock it over. No, I stay till the end. So what else? Yeah, well, I'm playing Rich's play-by-post Urban Shadows for right now, which is fun. It's pretty much the only regular gaming I'm doing right now. I have an Apocalypse World Skinner who's been, oh my gosh, that's probably like a year old, but we don't play very often. Oh, and then I'm playing Primetime Adventures with Mark Delsing up at Games Plus, and that's super fun. We are playing sort of a lost J.J. Abrams. We thought we went 20,000 years into the future, but really we went 1 year in the past. And in the last game, I got to beat the snot out of my boss. So that was fun times. Yeah. I can't see your thing. Is that still? Do I still have time? I can't talk this long.
You still have a minute. You can
Seriously?
stop early. It's okay. I'll stop early.
I don't know what else I have to say. I don't have a lot going on.
Are you doing games on demand as well this year?
Yes, I am. I'm probably attending Gen Con Friday evening through Sunday. So.
Oh.
Nice. All right. There you go. See, you did the whole 2 minutes.
Awesome.
Wow. Fantastic. There's a lot of good game going on, and I'm so excited. Judd, are you going to Gen Con this year?
I am not.
Neither am I. Yeah. Bummer. So one of these days, though, Star Wars Primetime Adventures has to happen again at Gen Con, Judd.
Yes, that'd be fun.
Okay. Let's move into the main topic. You guys are ready. Now this was kicked off by a gentleman who I don't know. He posted this to the G Plus Tabletop Role-Playing Games General Discussion, so it's a Google Plus community, and his name's Mark Whitley. I'm gonna kind of summarize. He gives, and unless you guys want to dig into, he gave like 4 points, and there was a lot of TLDR going on. But I
think the summary is good.
The summary is, how do you solve the problem of one failed roll brings the session to a grinding halt? How do you keep a bad roll or a few bad rolls of dice from ruining the whole game session? That can be a real problem, in games where you're everything's humming along and somebody blows a roll, and then what do you do?
Mm-hmm.
I think you've got to make peace with the uncertainty that you don't know. You don't at the start of the game. You aren't sure what the game will end up being about. It could be that this game is about a zero to hero villagers who go on a fellowship adventure and become great heroes and friends of the king and best buddies with the queen. Or they could be, a cautionary tale of murder hobos who die in a tunnel because they didn't bring the right equipment. And you don't know which one it's going to be, and the dice will tell you, and your friend's actions will tell you, and that's okay. A tragedy is okay. Make peace with that. Make peace. John, you okay?
No, I'm good.
You're just making peace with everything you got. You're just
I'm reliving every moment.
Actually, when we're talking about this conversation, I think that there's a really big distinction between the two ways that you've phrased it, Rich. I think there's a big distinction between saying, okay, well, we've got a game where a single roll brings the game to a halt, which says that there's a structural problem, I think, in some ways, versus one that a series of rolls brings the game to a halt. And I think that embracing the failure, embracing the problems, I think it's easier perhaps with the series of rolls where things go badly, it all goes pear-shaped, things come crashing down. When a game turns on a single roll, those are usually problems where the GM has presented a situation or that is a binary yes, no, we can't go forward, or where a player maybe has played chicken on some things. And I'm not saying always, but more often.
I want to quickly support what Lowell's saying in the sense that, usually when people talk about, we played a night of gaming and everything went wrong and, we blew all the rolls and, we had a totally party kill, usually people celebrate that, right? They're all excited or they're down, but it's still an epic story. But that's an example, like Lowell's saying, where you're rolling, right, a series of rolls or making a series of decisions. But usually, I've rarely ever heard anyone say, I failed the perception check. We can't get to the next step. There's nothing for us to do. Right? It almost feels like two separate things.
Mm-hmm.
Fair. And maybe I have conflated or we're talking about more than one thing. Just to get back to Mark's specific question, one of the examples that PCs need to find an important clue but miss it with a bad perception check. now they can't make further progress with their investigation? How would you handle that?
That's a structural problem, I'd say, right off the top. And if you've built your scenario in that way, then there are a couple of things that have gone on. I mean, Gumshoe deals with that explicitly. The idea that investigation rolls, you don't need to do those, if they are sort of key driven to essentially moving to the next room. And I think that's crucial. The other thing is if it's one person making a perception check, that one of the things that a GM needs to do is think about how they handle failure in general. Is a failure just a failure? How are rerolls handled? How are other people checking it? That needs to be modeled as well. I find it odd to think of, okay, well, one bad perception check mucks things up that badly. What kind of clue are you designing where that's the case? I think that's a structural problem.
I agree.
Yeah, I really like games like Inspectors where you make the roll, you tell me what the clue means. I honestly don't like investigative games. I don't like puzzles.
Yeah.
I like talking in funny voices and pretending to swing swords or shoot guns at fake things. And the idea of like that kind of micromanagey figuring a lot of stuff out really isn't my swerve. So I probably would never design a game where one bad perception check would kill it, because I don't think in long, drawn-out puzzles. I think of situations. I throw a situation, and I don't really care what the solution is, because however you tackle it's going to be really interesting to me, pass or fail.
I would add that I have played a lot of Call of Cthulhu games and Trail of Cthulhu in various forms, but I've played BRP quite a bit, and I know that when this topic comes up, often people online will say things like, "Is this really happening? Like, is it your GM an awful person that they would do this? Like, what's going on?" Like, there's a lot of questions like that show up. But I've seen it, and I've seen it actually done even by people who write official modules for Call of Cthulhu, and people, who you would expect are fairly experienced, but in the moment, make mistakes. Maybe they're just juggling too much. Who knows? But I've seen the thing where in investigation games, a lot of the joy that people get out of them is the sense of it is a puzzle. It is something we're unlocking. It is something that we're unraveling slowly, step by step. And then I've seen things where a Call of Cthulhu GM will say, make that perception roll or make that spot roll, and that fails, and then they'll be like, okay, make a no roll, and then that fails, and they're like, make an idea roll, and then make a luck roll, and then at some point you're like, okay, well, what's going on here? Right? Like, what game are we actually playing, and how does this actually work? Right? There are a lot of ways to address that, but I just want to clarify that I see it happen. And, there are some people who, it's the first time they're running a game, or they're not very experienced, or they're just juggling a lot of things, or they have an off night. It does happen.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead, Bill. I'm sorry.
Well, I was going to say, I think that early on, one of the things you need to do, especially the investigation game, is model for the players how that's going to work, and model how you're going to handle skill rolls in a particular way, that they get to do a second chance. Or you say, okay, well, you've tried this approach, what other skills can you bring to bear? Or things like that you work and show the players that's how they need to be thinking about it. Because you can have the roll till you drop, or you can look at making that, and you guys mentioned this in some of the notes that you wrote up, making that an opportunity to maybe move the focus or change the approach, especially if you're thinking in it, okay, well, they didn't find it through this methodology, what are the other methodologies that they can use, and how does that shape the story, how does that shape your description?
Mm-hmm.
I think that maybe it's easy to think that just because the players can roll for a thing means that they always have to roll for that thing. Mm-hmm. But you don't necessarily have to do that. If it's like if they have to find the key to get the door unlocked, and otherwise the door's not going to get unlocked, the game's not going to progress, well, then they should definitely find the key. So Like I get wanting to make rolls, like it's fun to roll dice and stuff like that, but just because there's a skill for it doesn't require it to be rolled.
Well, and with the key image that you get there, they get the key, but the roll is about what the extra information they get about the key is. What are the signs and sigils on it? What does the door look like? You know, who left the key? You know, it's all the extra information that plays into the larger picture.
Did anybody see the post that John Harper made about like fictional positioning and setting the stakes of a role? Does anybody know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Vaguely, yeah.
So one thing that John Harper and Emily Care-Boss have talked about a lot is that before you make the role, you can make some decisions, right? Like even in Call of Cthulhu, which is kind of funny because it's an example that gets brought up a lot. There are different entries in the various rule books that there have been that do address this, right? There is advice there where they do suggest things. It just might not be something that people are aware of or whatever. But the point is that before those dice hit the table, you can decide what does success mean, what does failure mean, right? So if you're someone who's like, you know, the most badass, you know, like investigator there is, if you're James Bond, right? Like if you're James Bond, it might make no sense at all for you to fail certain kinds of roles, right? And you could decide, right? Like if I fail and James Bond is about to, you know, take on 3 people who are blocking our way from escaping, then failing for James Bond might mean they only take out 2 of the, you know, obstacles instead of all 3 of them, right? And if they succeed, they take them out no problem because they're a badass and that's what they do. But if they fail, there's still someone there and they might have enough time to warn additional people and have more security come in, right? You can do a lot of interesting things by deciding what does failure mean here, what makes the most sense, what won't break our suspension of disbelief given the kinds of characters and the situation.
And I think something else to keep in mind is that if you're playing James Bond, let's keep in mind that in the first movie of the current reboot, he failed a driving role, got tied to a chair, and got hit in the groin with a rope. That's a bad night of gaming. Like you went home and you were like, "What happened tonight?" That's not, you know, that's not what you think, Jim. You know, it's not like, "Oh, touch the cufflink. Oh, I'm so suave." Like that's pretty rough. That's a nasty failed driving role. So I think sometimes when we play these super cool characters, we need to be mindful of that failure is a part of who they are. Overcoming that failure and getting to where you have to go anyway is what makes them interesting. I know I was running a sword and sorcery game with my buddy Storm, and while I was running it, I was rereading the old Elric short stories. And in the first Elric short story, he gets beaten up, his sword, Stormbringer, gets taken away, he gets thrown out of the castle of his enemy, and his buddies are in the forest waiting, and he has to crawl to them because they don't want to come out of the forest and give away their position. And that's not what you think of when you think of playing Elric of Melniboné, the great emperor of whatever. You know, you think it's going to be this, you know, this badass with a rune blade, but you know, bad stuff happened to Elric. He got back up, he summoned some elementals, and he went to it anyway. So I think we need to, you know, make peace with the fact that really awesome characters, badass characters, fail. Lowell, you're chomping at the bit. Go for it.
Well, and here's the thing: is in that situation, that's a situation where Elric went out and took a risk, right?
Yeah.
Where he put himself forward. And I think there's a big difference in terms of player perception between, okay, I'm going to make a risk, and now I've screwed up the roll, and I've fallen to the precipice, whatever, versus, Bob, why don't you make a roll for me for perception check? Okay, you failed, you fall in. You know, about autonomy there. I think that makes a big difference in terms of on what side of did I ask to make the roll versus was I told to make the roll.
Yep.
And why am I making this roll? Like, what does this even mean?
And I think the way you describe it can be a big thing. You know, don't describe your badass fighter player character's failure as a Three Stooges act. You know, make it be make it be a brutal miss. Combat is not easy. Just because they failed doesn't mean that they're, you know, Curly and Moe. It means that they messed up a very difficult endeavor, which is trying to hack someone apart with a piece of metal. That's not an easy thing to do.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the tone of it, right? A lot of times you can make failures sound like almost success. You're still a badass. Just something went wrong. Like you didn't quite anticipate this weird little thing that just happened. I also think. Oh, go ahead, Lowell.
I was going to say, or it's a chance to demonstrate the competency of your opponents, to up the stakes on that thing. That taking failure and using that as an ability to illustrate the kind of high-level opposition you're fighting. You know, oh, you failed your hacking roll. Oh man, you can see that whoever set up the security is way high level. You get a chance to add more details to the situation that way.
Yeah. This is not just a garden variety mook you're fighting. This is something else. Yes. Thank you, Lowell. You read my mind.
I've had failed rolls make a minor villain into a much bigger badass. Like, you kept missing this guy. He must be awesome. So let's just keep pumping him up. Whereas before he was just a random encounter.
The other thing I think you can do, especially with investigative games, is let especially if it's a police game, you can structure it so that cases can go cold and they can put it aside and pick up another case. Because sometimes that's the way police work works. I ran a cold city game, and I gave them 5 files at the beginning of the game, and it was a lot of work up front, but it ran for a month. And in the middle there, I could throw in another case, or I could have the head person say, hey, this is a political red ball. You've got to complete this case now. I need something. I need movement. You can do all kinds of weird little things, but if a case goes cold because of a roll, let it go cold. Maybe a patrolman will come with a clue, next week, and you'll just have to get back into the muck again. So as long as the rolls mean something and they come with a cost, I think it's not a bad thing. So yeah, investigative games are rough though, especially when it's like one mystery, at a time. That's a really hard game to run. I don't enjoy running it. I'd love to hear more from people like John and Terry and folks who are more comfortable with it, because I am not.
What are you not comfortable with?
I just want to give it to them, right? I just want them to, at some point there's an interesting decision they have to make, and I just want to get to it. I know it's there. Let's get to the interesting decision. So that's not a good way for a mystery GM to be. I've got to, but obscuring too much can just frustrate people and fluster them. So there's this really fine-tuned line, and I don't particularly find it fun to walk it. So I'm just like, oh, let's move on and make some interesting decisions, rather than hide things for ages and ages and ages. So yeah, that's what makes me uncomfortable, is that fine line between, oh, that was easy, and oh, whatever, we've tried everything.
See, I run a lot of investigative stuff, and a lot of stuff that revolves around planning out operations or doing things. We had a session just this last week where essentially it was a form of investigation game where this cyber ninja game, they're given somebody who they know they want to take out, and the game is about investigating and figuring out what are the possible ways we can get at this person, what are the tools we can bring to bear, and at least for the group at the table, for them, there's a real pleasure in bringing their competency to bear, and figuring things out. But again, I do try to start from, if they ask about something, I know what their skill things kind of are, so I can give them a baseline set of information, and then their pulls and their activities blow that up. Expand that. Give them more information.
Jen, I'm curious. From your time when you were running games on demand, you had a lot of new people who had never played like Monster Hearts or any other games you're running. How do you soften the blow for failure for people who really don't know what the hell they're doing?
Well, it's easy. Like most of Gen Con, I ran inspectors, so that's easy, right? Because when you fail in inspectors as a player, you describe your failure, or part of it anyway, and so you have sort of more narrative direction. One of the tricks I like to use is to not hit them with the failure right away, because nothing scares players more than failing a roll and then having nothing bad happen right now. And then I have time to think about it and maybe make something up that has more meaning and consequence, and not just, oh, look, you fell down and broke your arm. Because, you know, that's less interesting. So...
Cool. Yeah, I get that. I love how in the MC moves and in the Apocalypse World style of games, how there are soft moves and hard moves, and taking a failure and you have this menu list of really cool things to escalate the situation. I really do like that. And talking about Apocalypse World makes me think of another thing. Playing games where failure is rewarded can definitely make it a lot more palatable. In Burning Wheel, you have to fail certain tests to be able to advance. In Dungeon World, you don't get XP unless you blow a roll. So I think it's a different attitude towards failure and trying things that are more difficult in a game where it's just part of grease for the wheel.
And I think a little bit of what Judd was talking about too, where if it's a game that's about building tension, right? If it's a game that's about delaying gratification to some degree, because it's an investigation, you're slowly building, and often a lot of investigation games also have a lot of horror in them, right? So you have the creeping horror that's coming in. A lot of that depends on your players, right? It depends on your audience. The amount of frustration someone finds enjoyable is going to depend on who you're playing with. Right, so I don't think that there's like a universal rule of like extend the investigation for 3 hours. Right, the players that you're with, maybe they'll only are interested in tolerating that for an hour. Right, and after that it's not so much fun. Or they enjoy interspersing those moments with fights where they can get out their frustration and then it builds back up. There are a lot of different ways to approach it, and I think that what I find for me, and I think one of the reasons why games like the World games, right, Apocalypse World, Dungeon World, I think another reason why those games make failure palatable isn't just that they reward it, although I think that's a big part of it, but it's also predictable, right? So when I grab dice in Apocalypse World or whatever, and I have my 2d6, I know that if I roll a 10 plus, it means this thing. I know if I roll a 7 to 9, it means that. I know that I'm going to fail if I roll 6 or less, right? And fail could mean a lot of things because the GM has tools as far as how they address that, but it's predictable, right? It's predictable. I know what I'm getting into before I do it. What I see a lot of times happening in a lot of games like Call of Cthulhu is there's a sense of mystery, right? Like you're immersed, it's a mystery. But then people take that too far, right? They're like, it's such a mystery that you don't even know why you're rolling for anything. Like the game system itself becomes a mystery, and that's where a lot of these problems start to happen, right? Because you don't know why. Like, I mean, there's even advice in these games where it's like, GM, grab dice and roll, and just look at the players and be like, "What does that mean? I don't know." And then everyone's confused and they're not quite sure what's happening, right? So communication matters, and I think that if you're like, "Hey, everyone, they're getting away." What are you going to do about it? You say what you're going to do about it. There's a roll involved. You're like, okay, well, great. If you roll. If you get this, it's going to mean this. If you do this, it's going to mean that. Does that make sense? Great. Everyone's on board. You do it. There's not a surprise. You may not enjoy the outcome of that, and that might also create more interesting situations coming from it, but you're not blindsided. There's no gotcha moments. Yeah. I think a lot of times where you're like, why can't I think the common example, and it's a ridiculous example, is that someone has a language skill in a game like Call of Cthulhu. Like, I have Latin 80%, and you find a letter, and you're like, okay, great, I'm going to read it, and it's written in Latin, and I have 80% score, and I failed. What does that mean? I can't read anymore? Like, what happens? So you want to avoid those kind of things.
Unknown Armies had a really cool chapter on conflict, and basically it said, don't roll on your drive skill when you're driving down the street. Roll on your drive skill when your buddy is on the roof shooting behind you because you're in a car chase because some monster is driving a car behind you. That's when you roll a drive skill, because this monster is driving a truck and is trying to drive you off the road. So that's when you actually make a roll. Make it when it's meaningful. Because I have played games, I think it was, I'm blanking on the name, In Nomine. And man, we just had these angels who apparently just couldn't drive. There was no driving test in heaven, none at all, because we just kept getting into car. It was like a holy pileup every time we tried to drive down the highway. It was ridiculous. We couldn't go to the 7-Eleven.
Should have
So
watched Prophecy. Don't you remember in Prophecy, Christopher Walken? He always had like some thug that was driving for. It's
I can't drive. It's crazy. It's just an excuse to me.
So what happens is you can't drive. Okay.
So the other thing I do to get over my fear of a failure messing up the game as the GM, I ran a retro clone type of thing. It was Lamentations of the Flame Princess, and I was really scared of killing my first level characters. So I had them make up 3 characters right at the start. That way, if they die, they've got another one. You know, it's kind of an old Dark Sun trick, because Dark Sun was like that, you know, that terrible world where the world is really out to get you. Lamentations is an easy enough roll 'em up game that rolling up 3 characters was not, you know, it wasn't that long of a process. It wasn't bad. The longest part of it was really buying equipment. So that's another thing you can do to kind of get over that fear of you know, failure messing things up.
Well, that speaks to what you were saying before, too, Judd, about how if you're running an ongoing game that's an investigation game, you could have multiple cases. And sometimes cases go cold and you can pick them up. When you were talking about that, that immediately made me think about games like Shadowrun, where there's even recommendations that say make multiple characters because these characters die, like all the time. Even you may need to grab another character in the middle of a session of play. Be prepared for that. And a lot of that's setting expectations, right? Like if you know what you're getting into, it's easier to enjoy it, right? Because you know what to expect.
Nice. Do you want to go to the next example?
Yeah, let's do that.
Pushing this trolley along.
Let's keep going. The PCs need the local occult weapons dealer to sell them a blessed stake. It's the only weapon that can slay the vampire lord. A botched negotiation roll leaves the dealer hating them, and the PCs without any way to beat the vampire.
Again, single path. If you've got a single path weapon and the only way is the negotiation, it doesn't seem to me like that's clearly that's shut things down. Players are going to come up with another way to get that weapon, and that springs up a whole nother episode.
Oh, yeah, they're totally going to steal it. Like if they can't negotiate buying it, they're just going to. And in fact, a lot of the groups I've played with would not even try to buy it. They would just wait till dark and then go steal it.
Yeah. And then let's take it a step further. They don't steal it, right? They try to steal the holy stake that can kill the vampire, and they don't. So they're like, okay, well, I guess we're not going to slay him, but we'll drop him in concrete and let the concrete settle, and then kill him later. You know, like there are like don't feel like your players will come up with stuff, crazy stuff that you did not think of. Hopefully, you know, dice willing. They'll come up with things that you did not think of. So they'll be like, yeah, well, we won't kill him, but you know what? We're going to lead the vampire to that weapons dealer's house and see what he does. There's all kinds of crazy stuff that they're going to do to come up with. You know,
and you could negotiate with a vampire, right? Like it's a role-playing game. You could do anything.
Yes. Right. Be like, listen, just don't eat any. Just give us a week. Seriously. You know?
And if they are shutting down at that point, that may indicate that you're presenting it too much linear. That you've run really linear, and that the players have a linear expectation. Not necessarily that they're being uncreative, but that you've given them signals to suggest, okay, this is the only way they can do that. You need to go, okay, well, what else? Well, now, what's your next move, guys? You know, and ask them as if, okay, there's obviously a next move. What is it?
Yeah. What and Lowell, you've talked about modeling behavior in the past, and I think those are crucial points, right? So if people are not used to approaching a game a certain way, which is totally reasonable because people play games in very different ways, and different games require different styles or whatever. If this is a game where failing is not the end of the road, and there are many ways to approach this, if that's something they're not used to, then you might need to kind of egg them on a little bit, or give them ideas of like, hey, you know, I know that this didn't work out. There are many ways to go about doing this. here are some examples. These don't have to be the things that you actually do, just letting you know that you have options, right?
Yep.
And as you play, you might find it less and less necessary to prime them that much. But if they're not used to it, you might need to give them an initial push.
Mm-hmm.
And let the I remember one second edition D&D game where my buddy was running a dwarven monk, and there was this one room where there was some kind of demon out of the second edition monster manual, and it could only be hit by a +1 or better magic weapons. And everybody had a +1 better magic weapon except for this monk, who naturally walked into this room alone. And the demon lands on a table, and I had mentioned offhand there was like a tablecloth on the table, and I was like, you're dead, dude. This thing is gonna. It's had like this whippy tail with like a venomous infernal stinger. He was dead, and he's like, I grabbed the tablecloth and I throw it over his head, and like he rolled fantastic, and like the demon was all tangled up, and then with the other hand he grabbed the stinger, and then he held on for dear life until his buddies came and backed him up, and it was awesome. I didn't think he was. I thought I wrote him off. Like in my head, I was like, it's too bad. I really like this dwarven monk a lot. But let your players surprise you. Like, be open to that. I don't know. That's why I game. I don't game to get to the ending that I was expecting. I game to see my players kick my cool stuff kick my sandbox over. So they will figure stuff out. If they can't kill the vampire, they will find another way. They will call the vampire on the phone and they will have an earnest conversation with him. That's what people do. People get desperate. They do stuff. So.
Well, and I think you have a point there, right? Because, like, we're afraid of failure. As players, we don't want to fail. As GMs, we don't want to push our players into failure. But we play games for the chance of failure. Otherwise, we would just be writing stories.
Yeah.
Right? Like, we roll the dice because we need there to be a chance of failure. Then it feels satisfying.
Yeah. Well said. And be really open to that moment where a tablecloth is thrown over the demon's head, or your players call the vampire on the phone. Like, those moments are awesome. That phone conversation is awkward and really cool.
Well,
so let it happen.
And sometimes I've been in situations, especially if I'm running in conventions, because you don't know what someone's expectations are, right? Like, especially if it's people you've never played with before, who knows what they're used to. So sometimes I'll get a little melodramatic, and I'll be like, oh, wow, I guess, what I planned isn't going to happen. And I'll even take a piece of paper with my notes, and I'll rip it in half in front of them, and be like, we're done. Like, now I have no idea where we're going, but it's going to be awesome. And then it's great.
Yeah. I remember a version of that didn't go so well. When I was in college, I was in a Bofferlar, and this lich just walked into our cabin, and we were not ready to fight, and we were about to serve tea. So we were like, do you want tea? And like the lich was like, no, I don't want tea. I'm too evil for tea. And like I stepped out of myself, out of the character, and I was like, oh, just have effing tea. Come on. How cool is that? Like, we had tea with the lich. The lich came by. We didn't have what he wanted, but we totally had tea with him. And then he left us all unconscious and near dead. Like, just have the tea. It's more evil to have the tea. More evil.
Well, and sometimes what happens, too, is people build up what the consequences of something is going to be, right? Like, if we don't stop the ritual, the world ends, right?
Yeah.
Or if, like, Sauron gets the one ring, whatever, stuff happens. But maybe that's propaganda, right? Maybe that's just the shit you've been fed by the villains, because they're like, we got to do this ritual. We're totally going to, like, make it, and everyone's going to die when this happens. And maybe you guys fail, and maybe, they take over the town but not the world, or whatever, right? Or maybe it's darkness that's unleashed, but it's slowly spreading, and that still buys you enough time. The damage has been done, you can't save this place, but the rest of the world still goes on. Or if it's Lord of the Rings and Sauron gets the one ring, maybe now you're playing the rebels in a world controlled by Sauron, right? Maybe it's a totally different game now. It's a world enveloped in darkness, and your guys are the last hope, trying to eke out a victory wherever you can.
Yes.
Well, and there's all kinds of consequences for failure. Failure doesn't have to be, again, a binary. It takes longer. It costs more. Your your self-image is affected. There are all kinds of implications and spins you can put on it. I think actually the worst thing I see what GMs do is when there's a failure is they go, okay, you fail.
Yeah.
And then they move on. And especially frustrating if everyone else at the table has done stuff and they've succeeded and you fail. GM, take the time to tell them, describe their failure, describe how it faced their competency, all those things.
Well,
Yeah.
that's interesting too, in that goes a little bit also into rewarding failure, right? So sometimes how you reward failure isn't just like you get this mechanical effect or bonus or XP or whatever. Sometimes it's just something that the players get excited about, right? So I know that there are games or styles where when you fail the roll, the player gets to say how they fail. Like they have control about determining what thing went wrong that might actually be the most fun moment of role-playing for them in the entire game, right? There could be all this drama involved in that. It just sort of depends on how you handle that, because like Lowell said, there are some games or some styles where people run them, they're like, you failed, moving on. And like, that's a missed opportunity. Maybe that's going to be the most awesome moment of the game.
Yeah.
In our homebrew, that's sort of the basic principle of it. Okay, when you fail, you've got about a minute to tell me how you fail, or I'm going to. And after a while, they learn that they do not want me to describe how they failed.
Nice.
That they want to take control of that. They want to describe their failure and describe it graphically. And after a while, they will do much worse than I could on the fly. So it's all good.
What do you think your punishment should be?
Yes.
Oh, man, that's nasty. That's like an old dirty mom trick, man. That's brutal.
Well, one of my favorite GMs, Todd Fuller, who runs games at various conventions at Gen Con, he runs Unknown Armies, and when you fail a roll in that, or a stress roll or whatever, he puts 3 index cards in front of you. They're set up in tent form. So he puts these 3 cards in front of you, and they say fight, freeze, or flee. So he says, okay, you failed the roll, fight, freeze, or flee. You have 3 seconds. Which of these are you going to do? Right, and then like the people are like, oh, I don't know, tension, and it's appropriate for the style of game, and they'll be like, great, I'm gonna flee, and he'll be like, wonderful. You start to run away, you run into the street. There's a car coming because you ran into ongoing traffic. Okay, bam, you have control of your character again. What do you do now? And all of a sudden it ups the tension, and it's just really exciting.
Yeah.
The paranoia shout and point. Yeah, that's great. That's awesome.
The other kind of diagnostic tool you can do is if you find yourself saying, you fail the roll, moving on, then this might not be a post-failure problem. This might be a pre-roll problem where you're calling for rolls that just aren't necessary. Mm-hmm. So if you find that your failures are really flat, it could be that you're just calling for too many rolls. So that's something to watch out for.
Well, if that's happening and its players are asking to use their particular skills and their failure and things like that, I mean, if somebody's called for a role like a merchant role or some role that should be a signal that that's something that they're interested in. So take the time to slow down and describe what goes on with that, how their training comes into play. It's an opportunity to describe the world, if nothing else.
Nice.
Good. Let's move along. Do we want to tackle the last 2 points? I think we. Okay. The rogue in the party gets bit by a poisonous spider. Crit fails his fortitude save and dies. Traps and locked doors and the rest of the dungeon become nigh insurmountable obstacles for the rest of the party. Well.
Time to go back to town and hire like 2 thieves.
Yeah.
Clearly. So you have a backup.
There are 2 situations with the spider happens. Did it happen in combat, in which case anything goes by my standard? Once you get into combat, all bets are off. Or did you drop the spider down on him? I don't know.
Spiders can smash chests open.
That's true.
And what if the players tame the spider?
And they milk it. They come up with their own anti-venom.
I don't think it's a mammal, but I guess you could for the venom. Okay.
Yeah, I didn't milk it for milk. I meant
Okay.
so I did that.
I had a whole weird image there, spider milk.
Yeah.
Moving,
I don't know.
moving right along.
Yeah, the PCs get into a scuffle with some street thugs. A couple of ill-timed failures leave the party mortally wounded, while the PCs languish in the hospital or the morgue. The villains carry out their nefarious plans. Awesome.
I think John already did that with the Sauron wins deal.
Yeah.
I think we kind of covered that one.
I see no problem with that one.
Yes.
Describe how they slowly bleed out in the hospital.
Nice. And Judd, you were a huge fan of the Midnight campaign setting, if I remember correctly, which was exactly that.
Yeah. No, it was 100 years after Sauron had won. Yeah, that's a cool setting. It's cool.
I mean, the other thing too is I think people also think very linearly, right? So we were talking about people think too much in binaries, right? They're like it's this or that, but people also think very linear. What's to stop you from doing flashbacks, right? So maybe maybe they're dead, but maybe something that they completely missed that was really interesting will be a fun thing to play out before the session wraps up.
And like how cool is it to have like the pulp heroes, convalescing in the hospital, and the nurse is bringing them newspapers with like Moriarty becomes prime minister, Moriarty declares war on the United States of America, Moriarty wins. Too bad your knee's not healed. Keep doing your PT.
And you could have them play Moriarty, right? Like you could do a couple of scenes where they get to play the villains, bragging about how they whoop their asses.
I think it could be fun. I think there's fun game to be had there.
Mm-hmm.
Let them die. Let them die. Let them pick one of the player characters, create the either person inspired by or child of, go to the next generation in the horrible world that their failure created. Bam.
Yep.
Yeah. One of the best tools you have is your player's ego, and they hate that kind of failure. So I mean, you can tighten the screws there by doing the session where as you say, they're getting the newspaper reports, or they're forced to go underground while the evil forces are hunting for them, and you have a session describing how they have to survive. You do a survival session, and challenge them, and you make that healing sort of interesting. Again, it's a real opportunity.
Yeah.
I think we're good. I think we did a good job here, guys. And Jen, thank you so much for coming in. I really love having you on with these mean people. So
Mean.
Jen can be pretty mean, actually.
I don't think
that's you, John.
true.
I mean, who's gonna believe John over me? I'm just saying.
That is true.
Yeah. Sorry, John. I think you lose. Awesome. Well, thanks, Jen, John, Jet, Lowell. You're the only. Me and you were the only non-Jays. I just realized
I know.
that there was a symmetry here, and we blew it. So, what's your J nickname?
I don't have a J nickname.
Mine's Jakarta.
Jakarta.
Right here now, my J nickname in the next hangout that's all J's. That will be Jakarta Rich Rogers. So there you go.
Lowell, I just wanted to back up and talk about Lowell's 2 minutes. You mentioned something about Glorantha, but like you were just using a piece of Glorantha for a different game. What was up with that? I missed it. It was going by too fast.
Well, I've torn bits and pieces out of Glorantha in the past. Gosh, I can't. This 43 AD that I read is about legionaries in Rome, and they don't know what's going on, and the Druids, and there's all this weird stuff and things like that. And I was everything I read for that, I imagine that as the lunar troops in Sartar or in Prax or whatever. And I think it's a great framework actually to do a game like that.
Yep, that makes sense. Okay, got it.
Okay.
All right, we're coming in right at the hour mark, so I'm gonna cut us off. You get any last thoughts? We're done. Anybody? Last
I
thing.
kind of like that, like the light of the Lord is behind my head here. It's kind of cool.
I thought you were trying to
I'm
do
jealous
some kind
now.
of Star
All right,
Trek
you can
J.J.
be an
Abrams
angel,
thing.
but you can't drive. No driver.
Can't drive. That's
I
right.
I look like I have divine providence this show. It's pretty awesome. I'm
No,
gonna,
see, now John is trying to copy you.
I'm trying.
Lens-
It's not
lens
working.
flare. So you know it's
Okay. All right. This is obviously the
Heretic.
time we end. Thanks everybody for coming on This Imaginary Life, and thank you very much to Mark Whitley for posting your question. And if you have questions, if you need help, if you just want to hear us talk for a little bit about a thing that you thought of or had a problem with, bring it. This Imaginary Life is on Google Plus, and also you can see it on YouTube. Have a great evening.